Hi everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video, with the PTR hitting for patch 9.0.5 yesterday, we're going to be looking at the biggest changes to the classes, to the specs, and in particular, lots and lots of their Covenant abilities here in today's video. There'll be timestamps in the description if you want to jump to your favorite class and see what's changed for them. And yeah, we'll obviously do more videos, of course, as this patch develops, as more changes come in, as Blizzard either increases or decreases the existing changes. We'll see how it all goes. And of course, if you like this video, stick around. BlizzCon's coming in like just over 1 week. I'll have lots of coverage there for that, and hopefully info about patch 9.1. So yeah, without any further ado, let's dive in. First up, let's look at the Death Knights, who have got a couple of buffs to some of their underrepresented covenants. Death's Due for Night Fae Death Knights, which of course replaces and upgrades your death and decay, has been buffed. This used to reduce the damage that enemies dealt to you by 1% per stack, up to a maximum of 8%, and then transfer that power to you as strength. It now will reduce the damage they deal to you by 2% per stack, so that's twice as much. It still does go up to the same maximum of 8%, but it just means that this is going to ramp up faster. The Kyrian Shackle the Unworthy ability, which is a 14-second damage over time effect, used to reduce the damage that the enemies with that dot would deal to you by 5% and also do a chunk of damage. Well, this now gives you 8% damage reduction instead, and the damage that the dot itself does has been increased overall by 15%. For Demon Hunters, we have a couple of really big changes actually. First of all, Fodder to the Flame, the Necrolord Covenant ability, probably the worst Covenant ability in the entire game, has, surprise surprise, been entirely reworked. The new ability is going to work like this. Your damaging abilities will have a chance to call forth a demon from the Theater of Pain for 25 seconds, and the demon is going to come and attack you and fight you and whatever, but Throw Glaive will instantly kill the demon. It will explode on death, and then do 175% of attack power in damage in AoE to nearby enemies, of course doing reduced damage beyond 5 targets, and it also will heal you for 25% of your maximum health. So yeah, instead of the old really clunky version where killing the demon would leave a pool on the ground and you'd have to stay in this pool and suddenly not be mobile like Demon Hunters are supposed to be, this is going to be much more reactive, responsive, and just give you that instant explosion of gratification. That sounded kind of suggestive. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, moving on. For Vengeance, Demon Hunters, of course, quite infamous, I would say, at the moment for being the best tank in basically all forms of content. Well, they're getting a couple of nerfs. Fell Defender, first of all, this is an endurance conduit they have, which reduces, or used to, reduce the cooldown of Fiery Brand. And this would obviously build into the Fiery Brand build and make them extremely survivable. This is being changed on the test realm. It now reduces the cooldown of Fell Devastation instead. That's still awesome to get cooldown reduction on that, but it's really going to nerf down the Fiery Brand build. The Kyrian Covenant ability is also being nerfed, or well, not the ability itself, but rather the conduit that makes it better, right? So this is Elysian Decree, which is where you put down your Elysian Sigil, it explodes, makes some souls, does lots of damage. Well, Repeat Decree was the potency conduit, which would make a second sigil 1 second later that would explode for, again, a big repeat of that damage. The damage is actually being nerfed by just over 50% or just under 50%. It's doing a lot less damage now than it would before, right? So it would start off at 25% bonus damage. That's down to 15% bonus damage. So yeah, Repeat Decree, not going to be anywhere near as strong. For the Druids, first up, especially nice little buff here for Restoration Druids. Obviously, you know, a spec which is generally struggling, especially in raids right now. But Rejuvenation, your main sort of heal over time, is being buffed up from 104% of spell power to 116% of spell power. It's about a 10% buff. And they are also seeing some buffs to, again, their very, very underused Covenant choices here. First of all, Adaptive Swarm for the Necrolords, which throws out a swarm, which is going to heal a target or damage a target, depending on whether they're friendly or hostile, for 12 seconds, and then it's going to jump to another target and alternate back and forth, back and forth. That's having its damage and healing just straight up buffed by 25%. And on top of that, of course, as you probably know, while the Adaptive Swarm either buff or debuff is on that particular target, it used to increase the effectiveness of your heals or your damage over time effects by 20%. That's going up to 25%. So yeah, I mean, I'm personally still not overly sold on this one, but that is quite a big buff to its effectiveness. For the Venthyr, we've also got buffs for the Covenant ability, though once again this is targeted actually at the potency conduit rather than the baseline ability itself, and this is the Endless Thirst potency conduit, which is going to make Ravenous Frenzy increase your crit chance. It used to give you 0.5% per stack, and that would scale up. That's going up to 0.8%. per stack. That's over a 50% buff to how effective that is. So that becomes a very powerful source of crit. Over for the hunters, we again have buffs to their underused covenants. First up, Necrolord. A little bit of a theme in the video so far, eh? But Necrolords, their Death Chakram ability, that's the 45-second cooldown where you throw a chakram, it's going to bounce around 7 times and do damage. It's having its damage increased by about 15%. For Venthyr hunters, well, Flayed Shot has just been buffed through the roof. Okay, so Flayed Shot is a 30-second cooldown. You fire a shot at your enemy, it makes them bleed for shadow damage, and every time it does damage, it gives you a chance to fire off a kill shot, or it lets you fire a kill shot off for free and usable on any target. Well, this has been buffed a lot. So first of all, this dot now does almost 30% more damage, and it also lasts for 18 seconds instead of 14 seconds. This is sort of a double benefit because not only is it doing more damage, but for every extra second that it's existing, it can tick more and is giving you a chance to get that Flayer's Mark and get that free kill shot, right? They've also buffed the kill shot effect from this, so it is still a 10% chance whenever it does damage to get Flayer's Mark. It makes your next kill shot free, makes it usable on any target regardless of their health, but it also now additionally makes it do 25% more damage, right? So those extra kill shots are becoming really, really powerful. And by the way, they also removed the 10 focus cost from Flayed Shot. It's now free to cast it in terms of focus. So yeah, pretty much every aspect of that just got majorly buffed. This could be incredibly strong for single target now. Really sort of differentiate itself from the Night Fae Wild Marks or Wild Hunt, whatever it's called. For mages, they've come in and buffed the underperforming covenants, i.e. they've buffed every covenant that is not Night Fae. Starting off here with the Necrolord, as is buffed for nearly every class. Deathborn has been substantially increased, right? So this is the ability 3-minute cooldown that turns you into a skeletal mage. This used to last for only 20 seconds. Now it's going to make you a skeleton for 25 seconds. On top of that, it is going to make your Frostbolt, Fireball, or Arcane Blast, obviously depending on your spec, hit up to 2 additional enemies near your target, and it's going to increase your spell power by 15% as well. Mirrors of Torment, which is the Venthyr ability for the mages. This is a 1.5 minute cooldown that puts 3 mirrors tormenting the target. Whenever they do an attack or cast a spell, it will do a chunk of damage to them, debuff them slightly, and also trigger a bonus effect for each of the different specs. So this has been buffed for Arcane. This used to give you 4% mana whenever a mirror was consumed. Now it's just going to straight up give you clear casting. Okay, so just a free clear casting every time a mirror is consumed. For Frost, it's still the same, as far as I know. It just gives you a brain freeze. For Fire, this used to reduce the cooldown of Fire Blast by 4 seconds. It now is going to reduce it by 6 seconds instead. So yeah, Venthyr, to be fair, was already very, very good for Frost Mage. It should be a lot better for Arcane, and a good chunk better for Fire now as well. For the Kyrian Radiant Spark ability, this is a 30-second cooldown that puts a debuff on the target, doing some damage over time, and also ramping up the damage of your next 4 spells by 10% stacking damage per spell. Well, this has had its damage increased by about 20%. For monks, we don't have too many changes quite yet, but a small little tweak for the Mistweaver monks, Renewing Mist and Vivify, so your main heal over time and your main heal, I guess, are having their mana costs reduced by around about 5% each, so that's a nice little perk for monks. For paladins, they're going to see Holy Shock cost about 15% more mana, so more mana cost for holy paladins. And then for all paladins, can you guess what covenant got buffed? Did you guess Necrolord? Yes, you're right. Wow, what a shocker. Necrolord is being buffed yet again. So this is still your 30-second cooldown ability. It still does the exact same amount of damage it did before, and it still has all of those same effects, right? Where your Templar's Verdict or Word of Glory are going to trigger an extra holy power finishing move. The thing that they've added to this is that Vanquisher's Hammer now generates 1 holy power, right? So this now fits nicely into your rotation and is going to help speed you towards getting that empowered finishing move off. So yeah, nice buff there. Over for priests then. Discipline is getting a couple of tweaks, and no real surprise again, I think, here, but Spirit Shell is being nerfed. So Spirit Shell lets you for 10 seconds make your Penance, Power Word Radiance, and Atonement make absorb shields instead of healing the target. Whereas up to now, this has been converting 100% of the healing into shielding. Now it's only going to be 80% of that healing into shielding. So yeah, you're gonna overall heal for less now than you would have before, but the benefit is that you can set up big shields on your team before big hits come in. So yeah, making that trade-off actually be more of a trade-off and not just a straight-up crazy benefit. The Kiss of Death legendary, however, is seeing a buff for them, which is kind of nice. So now it will reduce Shadow Word Death's cooldown by 12 seconds instead of only for 8 seconds. And of course, it still makes the damage trigger atonement when used on targets below 20% health. Still seems fairly situational to me, but I don't know, maybe this will see a little bit more play now that you're not just running Clarity of Mind to sync up with every single Spirit Shell all the time. And then in the most baffling move, to me, the most baffling buff out of all of these changes so far, I guess maybe I'm more in tune because I actually play Priest myself, they're actually buffing Night Fae. The Night Fae Covenant ability for Priests is being buffed. So the way that Fae Guardians works, right, it's a 1.5 minute cooldown that summons in 3 Fairy Guardians for 20 seconds that are going to go and help you out and do different effects. So, first of all, the Wrathful Fairy is still the same. It's going to give you some mana or insanity back on the target that you last put Shadow Word Pain on. The Guardian Fairy, I think this is fair, has been buffed, right? So this used to give you 10% damage reduction on the last target you put Power Word Shield on. Now it's going to give 15% damage reduction on the last target with Power Word Shield. I think that's quite nice. The crazy thing to me here, though, is the Benevolent Fairy, okay? Which increases the cooldown recovery rate of your target's major ability. This used to be by 100%, now it's 150%. Okay, so let's say for Shadow Priest in particular, whereas before, 100% cooldown reduction for 20 seconds, which is as long as the Fae Guardians last, that would have given you 20 seconds off of your Void Eruption, bringing it from a 1 minute 30 to a 1 minute 10 second cooldown. Now, with 150% cooldown reduction, it brings Void Eruption and Void Form from a 1 minute 30 to a 1 minute cooldown, which is a massive deal. Also syncs up, by the way, perfectly with Power Infusion, which is a 2 minute cooldown. So every second Power Infusion, instead of being kind of off on its own, will now sync up perfectly with Void Eruption and Void Form, which is insane. Even more insane, you can now give 30 seconds cooldown reduction on your favorite Fire Mage's Combustion. So instead of just 20 seconds, I say, quote unquote, just 20 seconds. So yeah, this one is kind of nuts, especially so because, well, if you guys have been following Shadow Priest, I've mentioned this a lot on my stream. People have been asking me, hey, Nubkeks, Night Fae has emerged as the most powerful Shadow Covenant. Should I switch to it? And what I've been answering to them, because I'm still Venthyr, is if I was a Shadow main, if I was only playing Shadow, then yeah, I would have switched to Night Fae already. I'm still Venthyr because I'm playing Discipline Priest on the next few bosses in our progress raids. But yeah, they've just buffed the best Covenant, which is nuts. So Shadow Priests, unless something changes here, you are all playing Night Fae in the next patch in 1 month from now. So brace yourselves, prepare, and yeah, again, this is just kind of insane. I expect they might revert this because it's kind of OP. Over for Rogues, it appears that they are reworking the Flagellation Covenant ability as well. It seems that the new one, this seems a bit weird, so I'm not sure if this is actually correct, but here we go. It's going to be a 1.5 minute cooldown where you're going to lash the target for 100% attack power shadow damage and then increase the range of your melee attacks by 6 yards for 10 seconds. Now again, presumably this would affect basically all of your attacks would be considered melee attacks. But yeah, that's certainly quite odd on a 1.5 minute cooldown. I'm not exactly sure. This perhaps seems a bit placeholder to me still because that still seems pretty bad. But then again, I guess all the Rogue Covenant abilities are considered to be, well, pretty bad. So hey, maybe it's actually okay. Rogues, let me know though what you think about that one. I'm really not sure what to make of it. Over for the Shaman then, again we see a bunch of buffs to a bunch of Covenants. Again though, we have one here which kind of doesn't make sense to me. We'll come back to that in a second though. First up, Lightning Shield, just worth mentioning. But Lightning Shield has been buffed. The damage that it does whenever you are attacked by a melee attacker has been increased by a factor of 4. So yeah, it's going to do 4 times as much damage now. Which is kind of a hilariously big buff. The first Covenant ability being buffed for the Shaman is Fey Transfusion for the Night Fae. I think this is one of the only classes in the game that never plays Night Fae, at least up to this point. But this is being buffed. Of course, Fey Transfusion, it's your channeled ability for a 3-second channel to do a chunk of damage to up to 4 enemies in the targeted area. That damage has been increased by about 25%, so it's going to do quite a bit more damage. And then the secondary effect, where you could press the button again within 20 seconds to release 40% of the damage that you dealt with Fey Transfusion as healing to up to 4 allies. That's been buffed up to 60% of all the damage you did will be released as healing. So yeah, both sides of that coin had been buffed. The Vesper Totem, the Covenant ability for Shamans in the Kyrian Covenant, which is a 1-minute cooldown, drops down a totem for 30 seconds, and your next 3 damage spells make it explode for damage, and your next 3 heals make it explode for healing. That's had its damage and healing increased, again by about 25%, a really big buff to that one. So I'll be interested to see what happens with that. I know that this was a lot of people's favorite Shaman Covenant back on the beta, and that's a really big buff, so we'll see what happens. But then the weird change here that really makes no sense to me is that they've also buffed Necrolord for Shaman, even though Necrolord is incredibly good for Shaman. This is of course the Primordial Wave ability, which is a 45-second cooldown, where you're going to blast your target with a Primordial Wave, either doing a little bit of damage or a little bit of healing, putting Flame Shock or Riptide on the target. And then for Elemental Shaman, of course, it's making your Lava Burst hit every target hit by Flame Shock. That's still the same, that hasn't been buffed. The thing that does make sense is they've buffed the effect for Enhancement Shaman. It makes your next Lightning Bolt hit all targets affected by Flame Shock. That has been increased to 150% damage on that Lightning Bolt. So that's quite nice because, again, it sort of messed with your rotation. That becomes a lot more attractive for them. The crazy part, though, is they've buffed this for Restoration Shaman? Hello? What? Of course, this makes your next Healing Wave also hit all targets affected by Riptide. And again, they've increased this from just doing normal Healing Wave healing to 150% healing instead. So I don't know what the deal with this is. Again, most Resto Shaman were running Primordial Wave for raiding, and they've just buffed that extra Healing Wave effect. Yeah, that's a bit crazy, so we'll see what's going to happen with that one. At least I'm glad that they've buffed it for Enhancement, because it felt really bad to play this one on Enhancement, in my opinion. For the Warlocks, we're seeing a pretty big nerf here to Affliction Warlock. If my maths are correct, which I'm not 100% sure that they are, it looks like Malefic Rapture, which is of course your Soul Shard Spender, one of your main sources of damage here. It looks like its damage is being nerfed by about 5%, which is actually pretty substantial. So yeah, big nerf to Affliction Warlocks there, which I think is, to be fair, fairly warranted. However, the good news, perhaps you might get a more Warlocky Covenant choice here, but Impending Catastrophe, this is the Venthyr Covenant ability. It's a 1-minute cooldown, which throws out this cloud of chaotic anima that does a bunch of AoE damage, explodes, and puts curses on stuff. It's had its damage increased by about 10% overall, so nice bit of extra damage there for that. And then finally, one of the most exciting changes for sure, I think, in this patch is that we have a rework to the Necrolord Covenant ability for Warriors. So this is the new version of Conqueror's Banner. The old version would give 20% max health and 10% attack speed to you and 4 allies within 15 yards of the banner, and then it would start building up glory, which would give you, like, I think crit rate or something. That's been completely changed. The new version is very tasty. You will now brandish the Conqueror's Banner, giving 500 mastery and 30% increased move speed to you and your 2 nearest allies, and also prevent your movement speed being reduced below 100%. This lasts for 15 seconds, generates 4 rage per second, and it also now has an only 2-minute cooldown. That's down from 3 minutes. So this just became absolutely nutty. This is going to be beyond terrifying in PvP. You're going to be everyone's new best friend in raid as well. You know, I think we're all waiting for the Convoke the Spirits melee balance druid now coming in beside the warrior. I don't know if that's worthwhile with how Convoke works in melee, but who knows? Maybe it is. But yeah, it's great to see, you know, it's great to see that Necrolord theme and that warrior theme sort of be represented more in this banner. The banner of hugging now, where everyone will crowd in and give you a nice hug, being your best friend. Friendship, the power of friendship. Yeah, it's strong. So yeah, there you go. And one final awesome change as well. If all of those Covenant buffs we've talked about to individual classes and their Necrolord Covenant abilities wasn't enough for you, well, guess what? The general signature Covenant ability for Necrolord Fleshcraft is being mega buffed as well. So this used to be a 4-second channel that gave you a shield for 20% of your max health for 2 minutes. And then you could obviously channel it near corpses to make it do more stuff and weird things like that. New version, channel for 3 seconds, give you a shield for 40% max health. And also, while you are channeling, your damage taken is reduced by 30%. So yeah, needless to say, this is insane. The shield is twice as big. You get 30% damage reduction for 3 seconds while you're channeling this. You can also now move near enemy corpses to reduce Fleshcraft's cooldown by 1 second, so that's kind of fun. But yeah, this is a mega buff. This has changed now from an ability that you would maybe, you know, cast before a fight and it would be almost useless, right? To being something that you can genuinely channel during fights and it can have a massive impact. Completely huge impact. So there you are, guys. Some pretty insane changes so far on the PTR, I think. Really making some fairly sweeping changes to Covenant balance in particular. Let me know what you think of the changes. Do you think any of them are especially good? Are you really excited for any? Are there any that you think are really crazy, don't make any sense at all? And you're flipping your tables over, crying about Blizzard? Let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.